And we should be live. Welcome, welcome, welcome to For Feck's Sake Marketing Adventures with Carmel, a place where we share tips, tricks, insights with you about marketing, including the slip ups and the successes. But we also bring you some inspiring business builders and exceptional entrepreneurs who have overcome some hurdles to market their business. And if you're watching this on social media, make sure you give us a thumbs up or a like or a comment as we go. We'll answer the questions if there's any live comments. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and the little bell beside us so you can be notified of when we have our next interviews as well. So we're talking today about a feeling exhausted. It may be to do with your sleep. So I have an amazing guest here today, which is Duncan Price, all the way from the UK. What a small world this is that we're able to connect like this. So welcome, Duncan.
Hi, Carmel. Thank you for having me on the show. And hi, everyone watching.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. So Duncan is a hypnotherapist and a coach based, as I said, in the UK. And he helps people with stress, confidence, and ways to avoid burnout. Burnout is an absolute topic of conversation in so many places at the moment by understanding how you sleep. So a very fascinating topic we're going to dig into. And Duncan knows the importance of mental health and the self-care versus physical health. So while physical health is important, what often goes unchecked is the mental health and our own self-care. So Duncan's on a mission, man on a mission to change perceptions and eliminate the stigma attached to mental ill health. And we all know that that is a big stigma. So before we get dug into all of this stuff, tell us a little bit about who Duncan is and how he came to this place to be able to sit here and talk with Carmel all the way in Australia.
Excellent. Well, firstly, just before we do start, today more than ever, I'm aware of just how important sleep is because I have a young puppy who's been unwell, and so I got very little sleep last night. So part of what I talk about is that things do go wrong. You can't control everything. It's about focusing on the stuff you can control and fixing it and learning to adjust and adapt to the things you can't, like the puppy deciding to get you up at 1:30 in the morning for the rest of the night. If my presentation to you guys today, if the way that I speak today isn't on tip-top form, then it just adds to my point of how important it is to make sure you get good sleep. So I'm Duncan Price. It's funny when people ask about who you are. You could list loads of different labels and things, but none of that really matters. What matters is I am a human being, and therefore I am imperfect. And it used to be very difficult for me to accept that. I come from a place of extreme arrogance, if I'm completely honest. When I was younger, I was a very arrogant person, and part of that was actually down to a lack of self-esteem, but an abundance external confidence, right? So very good at coming across confidently, but back then inside it was a very different story, and that actually led to, if anything, coming across extrinsically more confident while being intrinsically far worse. And arrogance, and there was a huge reluctance and resistance to acknowledge any shortcoming or trait that wasn't desirable to me within myself, because if I admit that something's wrong, then that's just another hit for my ego, if you like. And so for me, one of the reasons I got into doing what I'm doing is I learned self-hypnosis 15 odd years ago, met a bloke who was a hypnotherapist, thought it was a load of rubbish. Yes. And then he explained what it was all about, and I became curious and wanted to find out more. And I went and learned self-hypnosis and how to use it for myself. And at this point, I was blown away by just how powerful I was and how powerful the mind is and what I could do with it. And that's where my journey of step one, acknowledging that I wasn't perfect, and doing that in a much more, I was going to say more comfortable way. That's not necessarily true. It's very uncomfortable at points, but it's a good kind of discomfort when you start to reflect. And so that's kind of been a big part of the journey that's led me to where I am now. That lack of confidence influenced sort of various different things within my life and elements of anxiety and all sorts of stuff. But really, it was just about learning to acknowledge, be aware, and accept that it's okay to be human and therefore not perfect.
Yeah.
But it certainly impacted my sleep at the time as well.
Yeah, and I love where you thank you for being so honest, where you say about the arrogance. And although you may have felt it was arrogance, I think it's actually quite common that we have this facade of being really confident within ourselves. So quite often it's the people that are more confident, that are more arrogant, that are actually hiding that lack of self-esteem behind it.
Yeah.
And quite often my background was hospitality, and quite often the more somebody would be angry with me or shouting and doing this, that, the other, I would know there's something else going on here.
Yeah.
There always was. And when you can come from a space of understanding that, I believe with somebody else, that they're not really angry at me, they're angry maybe at a situation, but they're more angry at themselves or upset at themselves because of this, that, and the other.
You are so right. And in fact, it's the same the other way around. When we, like, there's a lot of hate in the world, right? Which is such a shame because there's also an awful lot of love, and love is just a wonderful thing. Here's me being all pink and fluffy with my bush.
I've got pink on. We're good.
I'm not so pink and fluffy when I'm actually working one-on-one with a client, particularly. But anyway, the love is abundant, and it's a wonderful thing. And so often when someone angers you, when you get angry or you get hateful, or there's some kind of tension within you that you see as being caused by another person, there's a mirror being held up. There's something there for you to be why am I feeling that way? Because most of the time it's either because what's happening is going against an intrinsic core value, in which case okay, it may be more about them than you, but recognize what that is and why that's important to you and why it matters. Or the other thing is, quite often it's because they're displaying a behavior that you see in yourself and don't want to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reminds me, slight off the topic, but kind of on the topic. There's a book that I have actually, I'll share something about it tomorrow, I think. It's called Embracing the Selves, and it's from a modality called voice dialogue. But the premise of it is kind of from Carl Jung's work, as most things are like that, is that we all have different selves. So we have, the pusher, we have the ego, we have this, that, the other. But we also have a disowned self, which quite often, for me, for example, my disowned self was my victim. I'm not a victim. What are you talking about? I'm not a victim. I got over that. So when people presented to me in their victim self, or what I perceived as their victim self, I was quite often triggered by it. And quite often angry by it or whatever. Oh, for God's sake, why can't they just get over it? Because, as you say, I had pushed away that part of me. I didn't want to be moany, whiny, whingy person. But, we have, when we realize that they are just different elements of ourselves, different selves, I think of it as I have this massive big orchestra now, this big choir. They don't all have to sing at the same time, but by God, they all have a part in the choir.
The orchestra is such a beautiful analogy for it as well, because you're right, there'll be times when, the bassoons really aren't needed for a while. But then when they come in, they do really add some texture and context to it. Absolutely. And so the way I talk about that kind of thing is that these traits, effectively, and that's maybe a broader brushstroke, but these traits that we have, it's very easy that we see these as negative or positive traits, right?
Yes,
they're not.
They're just traits.
Negative or positive, as we would label it, existence of these traits. The way that they're portrayed and come out may be desirable or undesirable, but actually the trait in itself is not. So an example from my personal self and experience is, back then when I was arrogant, I also used to correct people a lot, especially when it came to English and language.
That's wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I used to do it a lot. And I fooled myself at the time into believing I'm doing it to help, because these people are wrong. And like me, because for me, it was so important to be right. I couldn't be wrong because being smart was kind of a part of my identity and who I was, and so therefore it was also part of my inflated ego, I guess. Ego's a good thing, just not when it's inflated in that way. And so if I wasn't smart, if I didn't have that, then no, I'm vulnerable
There's
now.
something wrong with me. Yeah.
And so there was a part of it was an assumption that other people would want to be right too. But really, as nice as it is to go, oh yes, I just wanted to help make people right because everyone wants to be right and I want to teach them. No, the reality was I wanted to be smarter than them. And if I correct them, that makes me feel good. What a lousy way to make myself feel good, right?
Yeah. But it's so great that you can recognize that, though. To come to that realization in itself is huge.
I wouldn't say that it's a negative trait. That was an undesirable use of that trait. Absolutely.
Yes, love it.
The trait itself, I wouldn't be half the therapist I am today if I wasn't so good at analysing people's use of language and what they say and the way they say it and what they're really saying when they say it.
What we're reading between the lines. I love it. Yeah.
And I'm good at that because I analyse the way that people speak, and I do that because I used that as a way to correct people and trip people up. And so the trait itself is not a bad thing. Sure, I diverted that energy in ways that were undesirable in the past.
Yeah.
But through doing that, I've been able to reflect and learn and grow in a way that I wouldn't have done if I hadn't have made that
absolutely
in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And just going back, just to touch on the ego for a moment, I believe, my belief is that the ego gets a bad rap. People talk all the time about, oh my God, just to get rid of your ego. And I'm going, if you think of that analogy of the orchestra, well, the ego just so happens to be the conductor. His biggest job is to keep you safe. He sometimes brings in that part of it, that trait. He brings in that self. He brings whatever. But an aware ego is something to strive for, to be aware of all those things and to be aware when you're in that fight or flight and you mightn't need to be or whatever that is. But anyway, oh my God, we could talk about this for ages. And it's really fascinating because I think like it's a good segue into that mental ill health. And it's a bit of a taboo subject. I was talking to somebody earlier and we were talking about cognitive biases. And, you know, when you think about it, there is a bit of a bias. And when we talk about a cognitive bias, guys, we mean a thought bias. Well, that must be true because I've believed it all my life. So you can't even hear anything outside of that belief. But I think that as a whole, in general, very generalized, so don't anyone jump on me, a lot of people, we have that kind of cognitive bias around mental health. It's a taboo subject. And if you have had any kind of mental ill health, well, there has to be something wrong with you because I can't admit it that it was ever wrong with me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I really want to pick up on, and you've done this really nicely today at the very start and just now, is that there's a world of difference between talking about mental health and mental ill health. They are different things, right? That when we talk about physical health, normally you go, hey, physical health. What kind of images come to mind? Eating a salad, going for a run, you know, looking after yourself. You think about healthy people, physically healthy people. You don't think about, you know, when someone first says, physical health, the image that comes to mind isn't heart attack, diabetes, losing a limb. You know, that doesn't enter into it. When we talk about mental health, just saying the words mental health, most people, it brings up thoughts of depression, anxiety, OCD, maybe even institutionalization and more extreme examples of it. Why is it that we don't hear the words mental health and think about being proactive in looking after ourselves?
Yeah.
Right? Because I work with one-to-ones. I also work in businesses, and you go into a business and they've got every business by law has to have a workplace risk assessment that looks at their health and safety of the workplace, right? What are the risks and hazards? How severe would it be if it went wrong? What's the chance of it going wrong? And how can we reduce all of those things?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Why don't we do the same? We do the same in our own lives with our physical health. We don't think about it, but we tell the kids not to leave their shoes on the stairs because you don't want to trip over them. Or, you know, we do think about these things.
Yeah.
how often do we stop and think about, well, what's the risk to my mental well-being and
Yeah,
wellness, not
we
necessarily
don't.
illness, and how
Yeah,
can I maintain and look after that? I want to look after my physical health, so I'm going to go for a run, and I'm going to
yeah,
hit the gym, or I'm going to stretch first thing in the morning when I get up, or I'm going to keep myself hydrated, which is a really
yeah.
important one. Anyone watching this, grab your water now.
That
Um,
hypnosis in action. I picked up my water.
okay. Um, you know, let's be proactive in looking after our well-being mentally and emotionally as
Yeah,
well as just physically. And then, yeah, sometimes it's going to go wrong, and
yeah,
sometimes you're going to need some help to get that back together. And that could be as simple as, a bump, a bruise, or a scrape. In which case, just go down the pub, have a chat with a mate, get it off your chest. That will
yeah,
probably be all you need to do. Or it could be that you've broken something. In physical health, you break a leg.
yeah,
Well, mental health, maybe you've hit overload and overwhelm rather. Maybe you've
yeah,
hit a situation where you just can't take it anymore, and you need to
yeah,
step outside of that and do something differently. And then other times it's going to be something even more severe, like a cancer or an illness. In
yeah.
which case, obviously, then that requires a whole different approach to look after it.
Mm.
But when we talk about the stigma of mental health, now, personally, I I completely understand where this stigma comes from, because
Yeah,
we talk about medication, right?
yeah,
Antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. To an extent, I think a lot of us medicate before we get to that point with booze or drugs or whatever else it might be as well.
yeah. Which people don't see as a medication,
Or,
but it is some
or
form.
Facebook, or scrolling through
Oh yeah,
TikTok. That's another example, where you just want to escape everything.
yeah,
We kind of have three choices when it comes to how conscious we are of things. We can either choose to retreat, we can just choose not to think about it at all, or we can choose to face it and acknowledge what's going on.
yeah,
And the sooner we do that, facing it, recognizing it, and acknowledging it for what it is, the sooner we can accept it, which means the sooner we can
yeah,
decide what we aspire to do,
yeah,
then we can start to actually achieve that, and then we can
yeah.
assess the journey, right?
First step always has to be awareness. You have to know
Yeah,
that there's something wrong. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there we go.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's the same thing with mental health. So with the broken leg example in mental health, it might be that you've just reached a point where your mood is low. Maybe it is anxiety, or maybe it's depression. And so, of course, the GP's first answer to everything is, here, have some antidepressants. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking antidepressants or any mental health medication. There's a massive stigma around it.
Mm.
Where I draw the line is that the medication for mental health is much like the majority of medication for physical health. It deals with the symptoms. So if
Yeah,
you've broken a leg, you get the leg reset, maybe in a cast, whatever else.
yeah,
You know it's going to take time to heal. During that time, you're going to rest it more, and then gradually
mm.
begin using it as normally as possible to build up the muscles
Yeah.
before you can start going back to
Take
running a marathon.
some painkillers or anti-inflammatories or
That's
whatever you
it. The
need. Yeah.
painkillers and anti-inflammatories, they're not fixing the broken leg.
No,
Just
no.
help you deal with the symptoms of the broken
Yeah,
leg, right?
million percent.
So if you get to a point where you need antidepressants, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just like taking a painkiller for your mental health.
Yeah,
However, it's also not going to fix it. It's not the be all and end all, that's it, you're on antidepressants for the rest of your life. If someone's suggesting that, then they're missing something there, because you
yeah,
can work on and change whatever it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's I love how you've put that, and it's so true that it's not talked about enough. But we were talking, like the title of today was feeling
Yes.
exhausted. So, like, what with mental health, mental ill health, physical ill health, and of course the environment that we find ourselves in these changing times where things do happen that you can't control it. You're right. We're a living, breathing example of that right now. And I do notice that a lot of people are in that exhausted stage. They're in that burnout stage. They've maybe had to work from home. So it changes the whole dynamic of everything. Maybe they're at home, maybe their partner's at home, maybe they've got kids that they've had to homeschool. It has changed everything.
Mm.
So people now are feeling exhausted, and all areas of their health is being affected. So we were going to talk about their sleep. Like, what has sleep got to do with feeling so exhausted, other than the obvious, you feel a bit tired when a puppy has kept you up all night?
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
I would say there's two fundamental things here. One is learn to love yourself, because
yeah,
if you build that solid foundation and understanding of who you are, and you embrace that and you accept that and you love yourself for who you are, then whatever stuff is happening out there, you've still got something solid to retreat to. Like, you've
yes,
still got a certainty there. So amidst all this uncertainty, if you really know yourself, if you're really connected with yourself, then actually it's all so much easier to deal with. The
yeah,
problem comes when we haven't done that work, or we can't look
yeah,
to ourselves. Suddenly, when everything's changing around us, there's no stability, and then we've
yeah,
got nowhere safe to retreat to, and that's when it becomes a bigger problem. And then the other side of it is, show that you love yourself. So this is,
yeah.
be proactive in looking after yourself, because you actually matter, by the way.
Mm.
Um, and
Just in case you didn't
yeah,
know.
even for example, school homing kids, or homeschooling them, maybe. This is the
Yeah.
last. Um, you know, it's so, I work with a lot of mums, especially, but parents,
Yeah,
and one of the biggest things with mums and their confidence is that they've spent so long living for everyone else,
yeah,
and they struggle with this idea of actually putting themselves first.
yeah,
So I like to turn that around, and I like to say, well, hang on a minute. What you're doing by not putting yourself first is you're bringing up your kids to put everyone else before themselves, because it doesn't matter what you tell them, they're going to learn from what you show them. And if you're not
yeah,
looking after you, you're teaching them to not look after them. You owe it to them to do better for you, which will
yeah.
help them. And one way of doing better for you, and I'll get onto the point that we're here to talk about now, is to sleep well.
Right.
Is my little guide. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, sleep is so important, because it's the foundation of everything. Your physical health,
mm.
your mental health, your emotional health, your ability to, your resilience, right? So when all of this stuff is going on, you need
Yeah,
energy. You need to be able to deal with it. And so often, the overwhelm that people are feeling isn't because they're overloaded, it's because they're undernourished. Now, that could be
right.
from eating
Yeah,
better and moving more. Obviously, they're important things. But sleep just creates the foundation, because I mean, it's how I got into helping people with sleep. I accidentally became a sleep expert because I was helping so many people. I know you kind of had a similar journey into marketing, didn't you? But I was helping so many people with low confidence, anxiety, depression, various things, and and stress, and it was having such an impact on their sleep. I found myself repeating to so many people about the key points
yeah.
of sleep that I went ahead and created an ebook on it. And then in doing so, I went deeper and ironically stayed up until dumb o'clock in the morning researching the importance of sleep and why it matters and how to do it.
I want to know some
Um,
more of it.
so
Let's have-
do as I say, not as I do. But
It's really important to get your sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning while I'm researching sleep. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
It's so
Um,
funny.
since then, I'm much better at looking after my sleep.
Yeah,
Interestingly enough, because that journey has really helped me
yeah.
as well. My sleep wasn't bad before, and ask anyone who's I was going to say ask anyone who slept with me, that could come across wrong. Um, I
Let's
can.
not go there. This
It's
interview's taken a whole different road.
I sometimes stand up in networking meetings as a bit of a joke and say, "Hi, I'm Duncan. I'm looking for people who want to sleep with me," and then explain I'm a hypnotherapist, and I didn't mean it in the way they thought. But anyway, um, yeah, so that's how I then created my sleep guide, which then led on to doing loads more stuff with sleep, and
Yeah,
becoming, yeah, diving deeper and finding out some really interesting things, and then finding ways to apply that understanding in a practical way that I can deliver simply to people,
yeah,
um, that makes it doable. Because this is the thing, I could sit here and go, "Here's so much information," and you'd go, "Okay," but it's not going to make
yeah.
a difference. So I
You
like
won't
to.
sleep because you'll be thinking about it all night.
Oh, yes, exactly. So I like to find some really simple, actionable things that people can take away to work on
Yeah.
this. And do that.
So my understanding of the sleep cycle, I have to say, God bless my poor dad, but my dad was a sleeper. My dad was an absolute, like, out for the count. A bomb could explode, he wouldn't hear a sleeper. And I have inherited his gene, because all my sisters say to me, "Oh my God, I would love to be able to sleep like you." I can get 8 hours minimum every night. I love my sleep. But it's also been a therapy for me. Sometimes when I was a bit depressed or a bit flat or anything, I had sleep doona therapy, as I called it, put the doona up over my head. But my understanding is, with our cycles and everything like that, that when we sleep, we go into a certain sleep, and then we go into this repair mode when our body goes into repairing.
Mm.
Now, if I understand correctly, and this was a long time ago that I heard this, was if you continually miss that repair cycle, which is only in a certain part of the night. Now, I used to work in hospitality, so I used to work late at night, so I would miss it a lot. That you can never actually get it back.
Yeah, so
You
people
can,
talk about, oh,
yeah.
I'll catch up at the weekend.
Yeah, I'll catch up, but it doesn't, because you're missing out on that repair cycle all the time. So that's how some people age quicker than others, for example, because they're missing in this really crucial repair cycle in your sleep. Is that, am I
Yes.
explaining that correct?
It's what's interesting is it's been known for quite a long time that we have this repair cycle where our cells stop multiplying and start repairing instead, basically.
Yeah.
But more recently than that, we've also discovered, so there's some of the smallest cells that we have in our body are the microglia, which is a wonderful word, and they live in our brain. And basically, what happens is they hang out at they hang out during the day, and they wait until we fall asleep. And when
they
we
crawl all over us.
It's literally a different brainwave pattern, and interestingly, can also be accessed through hypnosis. So you can get this repair benefit without the sleep, which is cheating. When I'm lacking sleep, I will go and take myself into a trance later to make up for it. But
not
everyone can do that. Anyway, well, everyone can do it. Not everyone's been trained. Anyway, so these microglia, what they do is they come out with their dustpans and brushes, and they clean the brain. So you know how every night, through the day, plaque builds up on your teeth, and then you brush your teeth before bed to clean all the plaque away. The same thing's happening on your brain. You have a buildup of protein around your brain cells and around the again, lack of sleep definitely impacts your cognitive function and ability to remember words that you use all the time.
And then you talk and talk and talk till you remember it.
The synapses, the protein builds up around the synapses and around the brain. And so then these microglia come in and they clean it out, and they sweep the cells down, and they brush your brain for you, and then you feel much better. And they literally, the cerebrospinal fluid kind of washes in waves through the brain, and these microglia get to work.
Wow.
Fascinating stuff. You don't have to geek out and understand that level of it to know why it works.
Just know that they're fixing it
basically,
while you're asleep.
When you get that full cycle of sleep, you get to a nice place where your body starts to look after itself better. Interestingly, hydration is and weight loss and all of these things are benefited from having this full cycle. If you miss that full cycle, weight loss is difficult, and for a number of reasons, but physically as well as in terms of then having the low energy the next day. So that sleep cycle is important for that, but also for hydration. So people talk all the time about how important it is to be hydrated, and it is. I've mentioned it once or twice already myself.
Do I have to have water now?
My problem is I'm overhydrated. I finished that before school started. So at that point in sleep as well, our body kind of goes from handling water as it normally does, I guess, to storing water and reserving your water better, which means that you're able to better absorb and utilize the fluid that you have, so that then the next day when you're drinking water, you then go back into the mode of flushing things out. But you've got a better, if you like, fluid reserve. It's
like everything's moving,
unscientific way of putting it, but
it's well oiled. It's well oiled.
Yes, exactly that. So it's like when you feel hungover, but you've not actually had much to drink. The chances are the problem is the lack of hydration, and that could be because it could be the alcohol that doesn't help, and it could be the lack of water. But a lot of it comes down to missing this stage of sleep, and so the body's still continuing to just flush the water through. And then the next day, it doesn't matter how much water you down, you're still thirsty all day long, or you're still dehydrated by the end of the day. That's because your body's not physically gone through that stage of holding on to the water it needs to hold on to. It's just stayed in that motion of just flushing everything.
Of just flushing out. So it takes a full almost 24 hours to get yourself really back into
It takes going back to sleep to get.
Okay. So just sleep, just stay asleep. Don't wake up. So I think we could talk all day. So can you give us like just on a practical side of it, two or three kind of tips into how somebody who maybe isn't getting the sleep that they need to go into those repair cycles, how would they start to do that? What do they need to do differently to start doing that?
Environment, routine, and bubbles. So environment.
You did tell me about
yeah.
Okay.
I've even got, I'll come to that. So environment, step one, assess your bedroom and think about the sleep environment that you've created for yourself. Is there lots of distractions in the room? And by the way, this counts and is probably one of the worst ones. It's my mobile phone, if you can't see that clearly on the video. Yeah, that should never join you in bed. It really shouldn't. If you're someone who sets an alarm on your phone, great, do that, but then put the phone the other side of the room. This will also give you the advantage.
My friend! Yeah,
no, it doesn't matter. It can be your
friend
when you're awake.
That is my one downfall, I will admit, but yes.
TV as well. There shouldn't be a TV in your bedroom. Bedford should be for two things. One is sleep, and the other one I won't mention.
Use your imagination. I refuse to have a TV in the bedroom, and I totally agree with that. But this one has snuck in a little bit more than it should.
So think about all of the senses as well when you're doing that. Lighting, make sure it's as dark as possible. Sound, make sure it's either as quiet as possible, or if you're someone who likes some noise when you sleep, and that it's better to have consistent noise. So if you're somewhere where you're on a main road and you've got loud noise, quiet noise, that's actually going to be worse than having constant loud noise.
Right. So I should tell the rooster not to crow in the morning as well then. But he does. I can't shut him up.
Maybe that's one of those things that's outside of your control. So the best way to control for that would be to change your behaviours and habits, which could mean going to bed slightly earlier, knowing you're going to get woken up earlier, for example. I'm not saying that's what you should do.
I die.
So, sight, sound, feel. So this is where we kind of think about the bedding that you're using. Natural fibres are much better for... obviously, women don't sweat; they glow. But you don't want to be sleeping in a glow all night. You want the covers to be able to...
I sweat. Let's be honest. No.
Which also kind of speaks to temperature as well. So between 15 to 20 degrees is ideal for sleep. Make sure your feet are warm before you go to sleep. I personally hate the idea of wearing socks in bed. Some studies show it can be beneficial. What I would say is if you're going to do that, wear socks until your feet are warm and then take them off just before you fall asleep.
Well, as a bloke, wearing socks to bed, probably, no.
Not for me personally. Smell, so avoid strong scents in the bedroom. You might like a bit of lavender. Some people don't like lavender. Actually, jasmine's quite nice as well, and that can be good for sleep. I personally think that's a much nicer scent than lavender. You can do these things. And taste. So one of the things that people do just before bed is brush their teeth, right?
Yeah.
Do you realise mint stimulates?
It does actually, because I use peppermint oil to...
You brush your teeth and you go, I feel awake.
Yeah.
Why, last thing before we go to bed, are we taking mint and the flavour of mint into our mouth?
So what should you do instead?
Brush your teeth earlier, half an hour before bed. Then
not right at
bedtime. You be eating in the half an hour before bed anyway. Maybe you might have a little bit of water to drink, but you shouldn't really be drinking much that close to bedtime either. So brush your teeth half an hour earlier. Then by the time you go to bed, the flavour will have died down, and it's not going to disturb your sleep.
Right.
So think about your environment. I've got a little bedroom audit. If anyone wants it, just drop me an email or get in touch, and I'll share that with you as well. So that's the environment. Next is routine. So we do this without even thinking about it in the same way with babies, right? We know that our job as a parent, we can't make a child sleep, right? Yeah. It's just not possible. All we can do
you're a hypnotist. Can you not do it?
Well, that's true. That's true. I was lucky enough to take on board kids when they were already past the stage of babies that don't sleep. So I can't speak
Right.
directly to it. But we can't force the child to
Yeah,
sleep.
I
What we
know.
can do is create the best chance of it happening by getting the setting and environment right
Yeah,
and giving them a routine.
so
We
true.
love routine. If we know that this happens and it's followed by this, then we're already ready for the next thing before it's even there.
Yeah,
So if we know that we have a nice relaxing bath, having brushed our teeth beforehand, so we don't need to worry about that later. We have dim lighting, and we don't sit in front of the screen, and we maybe read a couple of pages of a book if that's something that you find relaxing and calming, not something too stimulating and creative, hopefully. Or we take the time to brain dump before bed, particularly if you're
yeah.
anxious, stressed,
I'm
get
a
all of
brain
that stuff
dumper.
out so it's on a bit of paper, you can worry about it tomorrow.
Yeah,
Whatever your routine is, and I've got loads of examples of things you can do, but do all of those things consistently and have that wind down time rather than working, 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 working. Right, it's time for bed, lay in bed. Now my mind's got all of these ideas, which we've all done.
yeah,
I've done it too, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah, as you said, embracing yourself as the imperfect person that we are. We've all done it.
Of
Absolutely. Yeah.
course, you can then shortcut if you need to, and you can go to my website and join Relax Club. Here's a little plug, which is full of audio tracks that can help you drift off to sleep, and hypnosis tracks to help you with mindset in various different ways. But yeah, look at your routine, and not just at bedtime, but in the morning as well, because a good night starts with a good morning. Um, that's my cheesy little catchphrase for it. But actually, what you do first thing in the morning sets yourself up for the day, and your circadian rhythms,
Yeah,
which kind of deal with your peaks and troughs of serotonin, melatonin balance, and various other things that help you to get your rhythm right. If you get up and do something active first thing in the morning, I'm not saying you need to go for a 10K before breakfast, but stretch or run up and down
yeah,
the stairs a couple of times or do some star jumps, whatever fits you, but just something to get the blood flowing.
yeah,
And your body will go, oh, I'm awake now, it's morning. And
yeah,
that'll distinguish between nighttime and day, which means you'll be more alert generally through the day and better able to then notice the difference when it's bedtime again and
yeah.
maintain that pattern better. So those are the
Awesome.
two things. And then the final one, of course, I said was bubbles.
Yeah.
Because this is how can bubbles help you sleep? Um,
I love this one. I know you told me about this before we had
yeah,
the interview.
so
It's
I
awesome.
love
It's so
this.
simple.
This is one of the ways where I went, right, I know these bits of information and I want to deliver them to someone in a technique, a thing that they can do that will help. And this is particularly useful if you find yourself waking up in the night and you've got into a
Yeah.
habit, a routine of doing that. Because we do sometimes. It starts for a genuine reason, a full bladder, or a
Yeah.
child or a sick puppy or whatever it might be. It
Yeah.
just seems to be that 3 o'clock every morning I'm waking up, or whatever time it might be. Ironically, it's quite often 3 o'clock. So at that point, do something different. Step one, if you wake up and you're still in bed and you feel like you can drift off to sleep, go back to sleep. It can be that simple. But if you've been there for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes or more, and you're now still tossing and turning, still feeling uncomfortable and unsettled, frustrated that you're not sleeping, you're just going to get more frustrated. Get out of bed
Yeah.
and do something different. If you've woken up really anxious, cold water. It sounds daft because that'll wake you up more, but if you've woken up anxious, you can't be much more awake. So splash your face or submerge your face in cold water activates the mammalian dive reflex, fancy terminology, for kind of your body going, oh, we're in cold water, we need to reserve our heat and energy. So all your heart rate slows down, and that, of course, slow heart rate is calming. And then
Right.
the other thing is get yourself a little pot of bubbles, because first, it's something you've never done before, is gut up in the middle of the night and blow bubbles. I'm
Blah,
prepared
blah,
to
blah.
put money on that, but there's
Yeah.
probably no one watching that's done that. So if you're doing something completely different, you can expect a completely different result. It will break any pattern or habit that you have in place because your subconscious will go, oh, we've not done this before. What comes next? You can tell it what comes next is sleeping by
Yeah.
going to bed and following that routine, right? The other thing is that what do you do when you blow bubbles? You go like this.
Yeah. So you have to breathe.
A nice, calm breath. But if I tell you to take a nice, calm breath, you often focus so much on your breath that you're not finding it as calming as you otherwise would. Because
Yeah.
no matter how many times I tell people there's no right way or wrong way of breathing, everyone seems to have this idea that, oh no, I've got to breathe in like this, breathe out like that, in through the nose, out through the mouth, hold it for this many seconds. None
Yeah.
of that matters. Sure, there are advantages to certain elements of that. There's studies that show it. But more importantly is relaxing. And
Yeah.
you're not going to do that if you're worrying about whether you're breathing right or not.
Yeah.
Blowing bubbles encourages you to breathe deeply without thinking about it.
It's so simple and so powerful. Yeah, because you're right. Sometimes people do that, especially if somebody is guiding them to breathe. They go,
Yeah.
oh my God, I'm not breathing as slow as them, or I should be breathing faster. And it's all this. But you're just blowing bubbles. There's nobody else there. You're just blowing bloody bubbles. That is such a simple, simple technique, but so
Plus, it
true and
reminds you of when
electric.
you were young and happy and you didn't have cares and
Yeah.
worries and problems sleeping. It reminds you, like, watching the bubbles float is calming in itself, and eventually they pop and drift down, and all of that language just
Yeah.
ties in, and the imagery ties in lovely with
Beautiful.
that's
Now, I'm just mindful of the time. I think we could talk for another hour, but
yes,
let me just. So you talked about self hypnosis.
yeah.
So, and I know everyone can't do it or anything like that. So, how important is self hypnosis, and what's the best way to even start looking
Amazing
at the
question.
possibility of doing that?
Oh, I could talk about this for hours. In fact, I do. I run a retreat where I teach people self hypnosis, and yeah,
Right.
anyone can do it. They may not have the skills, expertise, and knowledge now, but everyone's
Yeah.
capable because actually, to some extent, we all do it already. So there's two elements to it to hypnosis, whether it's self hypnosis or otherwise, and that's trance and suggestion.
Right.
Trance, as in a trance-based state. It's trance-like. It feels good and it's so relaxing and it's wonderful. That's all I'll say about it. It's not actually essential to hypnosis. There are ways of using hypnosis that don't require trance. It's just a nice way of doing it. It feels really good, and you've already experienced a trance. Simple example: you're on your way to the shops or wherever, and you get there and you go, "Oh gosh, I'm here already. I don't remember the journey."
How did I get here?
All heard
Yeah.
that. Or
Yeah.
you're stood in the queue at the supermarket and there's half a dozen people in front of you, and before you know it, can I help? Oh, sorry, I drifted off. I was somewhere else. Anytime you're saying something like that, you were in a trance. All I
Yeah.
do is help people take that to a deeper, relaxing level. Um, so that's the trance like state. And then suggestion. Now, suggestion is around us all the time. The language that we use influences others and influences ourselves even more
Yeah.
so in huge ways. So, a big part of what I teach, and probably actually more time, is dedicated to teaching how to use the right language to write a program, a series of suggestions, which you can then install into your subconscious mind using your own self hypnosis. But do you know what? All of that takes a bit of learning, and you'd need to come on my retreat or find someone else's. But where to start would be forget about all of that complicated stuff and just use someone else's pre-recorded track
Yeah.
to help you to find that relaxed state. And of course, I have plenty available if you join the
Yeah.
Relax Club.
And unashamedly plug.
Course. Well, I would
Because
because I love it. But literally, there's
yeah,
plenty of other options.
yeah,
And if you really just want the most basic starting point, I would say forget about anyone telling you what's right or wrong, what you should or shouldn't do, and start off just taking some time to just be. Now,
yeah,
people will talk a lot about with meditation or hypnosis. Hypnosis is easier than meditation because you can kind of cheat and jump ahead. But with meditation, you know, people talk a lot about clear your mind. Have you ever tried that? When you're not really well practiced at it, is really difficult. Our mind is designed to think. What you're saying there is,
yeah.
hey, Google, stop doing the one thing that you're designed to do. No, instead, pick something to focus on. It could be a
Yes.
flickering candle flame. It could be a nice image in your mind. It could be some music you're listening to. It
Mhm.
could be the sound of a singing bell.
All right.
It can
Yes.
be whatever you want it to be. I happen to have props on hand. I've got a monkey as well, if you want that. Whatever it might be, go with that and enjoy that. And if
Yeah.
you find yourself wandering off and thinking about something else, that's fine.
Mm.
Notice that you've done it. Awareness. Bing. bring yourself back to what you were intending to focus on. Ding. And the more often that it happens, the more practice you're getting at refocusing, the
Yes.
better you'll get. And that will improve the meditation. It will also improve your focus in day-to-day life as well, which is really useful right now with all the distractions of life.
Well, this is it. And you mentioned, like when we first started about it, number one is actually loving yourself. And as mothers, you mentioned as mothers, we quite often put other people first, but that's a little bit of a ingrained, trained by society thing that happens anyway. So we don't even know that we don't know if that we that we don't know.
Yeah,
If I said that right. We don't realize that. I remember trying to do the meditation, and I have quite a busy mind. I'm like going, oh, for God's sake, just stop. And I remember a very wise, beautiful, darling friend of mine who's now in her 80s saying, Carmel, who said meditation was sitting in one spot trying not to think?
Yeah.
And exactly what you said, well, I quite often I have lemon, honey, and ginger in the mornings, for example. She said, pay attention to the feel of the lemon. Pay attention to the smell of the lemon. Pay attention to how it feels in your hand when you're juicing, all this sort of thing, which actually led me to being able to meditate because it was just being totally present. And the other thing she shared with me, and I've shared it with many, many people, and I don't know if you've heard of this, it's called an autogenic meditation, which is where through a script, but you actually record your own voice and then play that. So I have one at nighttime, so I would play that. Now, as I said, I'm a sleeper. I'd be asleep before that meditation's gone, but we all know the unconscious mind is still working.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it was that power and that suggestion and, embedding those great things as well. Do you encourage people to even start there with their own voice?
Oh, for sure. So when I run my self-hypnosis retreats, one of the things that we cover is how to then install programs in the future.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a selection of different ways to do it. And one of the most popular ways is for someone to record themselves doing it.
Yeah.
I offer a follow-up service where if they send me just the recording of their program, I'll insert that into an audio that I've got, which is kind of me
music in the background too.
Yeah. Then
beautiful.
Their own voice giving their own suggestions, their own programming, and then myself waking them up afterwards, which is a nice way of
because it's isn't it that because we beat ourselves up a lot in our own head. Let's be honest about it. So your own voice is much easier to get through any filters as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that part of it?
Everyone's different, and I'm guessing yourself and certainly the majority of people actually hear their own voice in their head, but not everyone does. Which when you've not thought about it can be really weird to think, hang on, well, how do they think then? Because I only ever think hearing myself, right?
But people just think. They don't always think hearing.
Because language is a construct, right? Language is something that we've attached. So actually, even those of us who hear our own voice, we're only hearing our own voice because that's how we've decided to interpret the thoughts that we're thinking.
Yes.
The thoughts that we're thinking come before we add the voice. It's just some people don't bother adding the voice because they've got other ways. Some people are very, very visual thinkers, so they see the imagery of what they're thinking rather than hearing the voice and various other things. So that was a tangent. What was the question?
That's okay. I was just talking about the autogenic meditation.
Yes. So our own voice can be really, really powerful to us, even if we don't hear our own voice in our own head. Hearing something said to us, because here's the thing, right? We are influenced by suggestions all the time. Those suggestions are weakest from people we don't know when presented poorly. They become stronger when it's a person we give authority to. Now, when I say give authority, we do that automatically with an Instagram influencer, or a famous person on that advert. There's a reason why people are paid so much money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But we're going to give more authority to a teacher we really respect and look up to when we're younger. Our parents, even if we don't like them, they naturally have and are given more authority in our mind.
Of course.
Especially when we're youngest, because they are our world. They're what we learn about how to interact with the world. However, there's one person whose voice is louder than all of those. There's one person whose opinion we never disagree with, because if we doesn't mean we don't argue with ourselves. We disagree with ourselves, sure. I do.
Yeah.
But we never disagree with our own opinion. Otherwise, it wouldn't be our opinion.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so the way that we present things to ourselves has way more power. And this is why I love teaching self-hypnosis, because
Yeah.
I can do it for you all day long, but it's going to cost you more money in the long run. Much better, come and learn how to do it for yourself. And
Yeah.
you've got a skill that will last a lifetime and you can use for so many different things, because everything in our experience of life starts in here, not necessarily physically in the mind, but internally within
Yeah.
us.
Awesome. Terrific. So as I say, I think we could talk forever and a day. Tell me now, with all that's going on in the world, how important has video become to how you can deliver and support and help people?
Oh, good shout. Actually, do you know what? Essential in some ways. So I already worked with clients online anyway,
Yeah.
because they were just too far away but didn't want to work with anyone else, or whatever it might have been, which is lovely, when there was a much bigger world of choice. Then when everything went online exclusively, it opened up so many opportunities, and it also meant, so Relax Club. I know I keep mentioning it. I've got the sign there. It's something that I did in person just to help a few of my sort of regular clients and friends. I ran this weekly relaxation club live, in person, and it was obviously brilliant. Obviously, and then the
There's
pandemic
that arrogance again. Is
I
that it?
just said it, and then I realised. But I agree. I'm not going to take it back because it's true. So,
I love it.
so I then the pandemic hit, and of course, people needed it more than ever, but I couldn't run it
You
anymore.
couldn't reach them. Yeah.
So it was just kind of by chance that I went, well, maybe I could do it online, um, and I did. And then
Yeah.
it grew from being a thing for a few friends locally and a nice way to spend my Wednesday evenings to still do it. So I've got a load of pre-recorded tracks, but I still run a live session every Wednesday
Every
at 8
Wednesday.
p.m.
Yeah.
because there's something about having that, like, oh, my yoga class is on Tuesday nights, or I do Pilates on a Thursday, or whatever. So Wednesday night, it just happens to be a Wednesday, but
Yeah.
it becomes, that's my night for taking some
Yeah.
time out to go and do Relax
Well,
Club.
you're creating that habit and routine is actually what you're
Exactly
doing.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's that consistency there in it,
Yeah. The
because
brain
otherwise,
loves shortcuts, doesn't it?
exactly, because otherwise there's a real tendency to go, oh yeah, I'll do that. I know I should do that, and I want to do that, and I will do that, and I
Oh.
enjoy it when I do it, so I'll do it. Oh, but maybe not tonight. I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, well, maybe I'll. There's
Are
something good.
you in my head sometimes? Yeah. And that's it. Well, because we've got busy lifestyles, and when we have other family members and other things going on, we can put stuff off and off and off and off. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, what do I do now? So we're getting closer to the end of our call that was supposed to be 30 minutes, by the way. And look at us, nearly an hour, but that's fine. So I have two more questions to ask you. Number one is the best place for people to contact you is on Facebook, which I'm going to flash up now. And also, you mentioned about some of your free sessions and things like that, or recordings.
Yeah, so
So
I've got loads of stuff to help with sleep,
yeah,
which
I'm going to
actually,
pop up your email, but that is also your website, the
yes,
um,
good.
.co.uk. Blech, that didn't quite work properly.
And if you add at the end of that /sleep better, you can actually get access to all of my sleep resources, which in a couple of months' time are actually no longer going to be available for free. They're all going to form part of a bigger paid for service that I'm offering. So get in there now while they're free.
I'm just
Or drop me
typing
an
that
email.
in right now.
Oh, brilliant. Or drop me an email and
So,
I'll help give you that.
oh,
And with
hang
anything
on.
else you need as well.
Something didn't work. I didn't hit sound. Oh, I see what I did. I
You
put
need
it
to
at, there
save
it
it
is.
and you need to add it
There
then.
it is. There it is. Duncan, but if you go mindaffinity.co.uk/sleep better, then you can access those as well, or you can feel free to email Duncan. Also, as you guys know, hop on to YouTube and Google, or YouTube, Google. You find me on YouTube so you can see any of the other calls. But the last question that I do want to ask you, which is one that I always ask my lovely people that have been on here. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, what would you be doing that's different?
Um, it's a tough one because I just love what I do. I would say if I had to stop doing what I'm doing and do something different, I don't think I could completely leave this world of as in the world of helping people, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what I live for. I just live for helping people. So I guess I'd probably do even more events and talks and workshops and in-person stuff, and less of my sort of one-to-one and online stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
The best answer I've had so far, and it was in 2 seconds when I asked a person that, who went pole dancing. And it was a male. I said, "What would you be doing?" "I'd be a pole dancer." I went, "Okay." And it's just a fun question.
I'm not sure I would be very good at that.
I don't think he would either, but he was fantasizing. He's a funny bloke.
Maybe I'd be. I would. If I had to stop doing completely everything that I do, I'd probably run a retreat center instead. So if I'm not doing it, at least I can be providing an amazing setting for people to do
For
it.
somebody
Plus,
else.
then I've got land to play around on and just twiddle about with various projects that I'll get
Oh,
involved.
yeah.
There we go.
Awesome.
That's
Duncan, it's been my absolute pleasure to chat with you. You always know that we're enjoying it when we go much longer than we planned. But don't apologize at all. It was amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And maybe we'll have you back on again, because I'm pretty sure there's a few other topics. So guys, make sure that you're getting your sleep. We all feel exhausted sometimes, but as Duncan said, make sure that you're setting those routines for yourself. And I know it's been vital for me, and I do go skew ways every now and again, but setting a morning and evening routine and an exercise routine have been vital. Absolutely. And I'll be making sure myself that I'll be leaving that more out of the bedroom. I knew that already, but I just wasn't doing it.
A lot of it we already know. We just need that nudge to do it.
Yes, we do. And go and buy yourself a bloody bottle of bubbles.
Yes,
if you're watching this after the fact, guys, make sure if you have any questions or anything that you would love us to hear or answer or support you with, please put the comments underneath wherever you're watching us. If it is on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button and that little bell beside us so we can alert you. If it's on any of the other social media channels, pop your questions in and make sure that you hop over to Duncan and have a look at some of those free resources while you can. But for now, it's bye for me. Where's my hand? There's my hand.